Hey guys, what is up? Super K-Man Rocks here, and I am here for my LPL Regional Worlds Qualifiers Finals Overview and Analysis video. In this video, we've only got two teams left standing in the LPL, and they're going to be going head-to-head, and we're going to find out our fourth and final seed to be heading to the World Championships from the LPL. Pretty crazy that this is going to be technically the last LPL video I make this year, because it's August. It's the beginning of August. It just started, and so for this region to already be done, it's actually astounding. LCK has barely started playoffs. We are really rolling in the LPL, but again, by the end of this video, we're going to know all four teams from the LPL that are going to be heading to the World Championships, and the LPL will officially be wrapped up. So, if you guys are excited, let me know down in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys thought of this series. Did it go as you expected? Did you expect a different outcome? Would love to know you guys' thoughts and opinions down below, of course, and I'm going to be going over all of my thoughts and opinions as well, but let's go ahead and jump right into it. If you are new here, what we do on the channel is we're going to go game by game in this series, talking about the advantages and the disadvantages that each team was able to generate. I will be giving a player of the game and a dud of the game for each individual game, and at the end of the series, I will give a player of the series. We'll talk a little bit about the teams that do end up qualifying for Worlds at the end, maybe how they're going to perform on the World stage, but for the most part, we are going to be covering the series today and leaving a lot of the Worlds analysis towards my pre-Worlds coverage when that does end up happening, even though there is this gigantic gap in between now and then. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick it off. It's a matchup between two very intriguing teams that are both, definitely interesting candidates even when they get to the World Championships. We have Edward Gaming taking on Weibo Gaming, and man, I'm really excited that one of these two teams is going to be going to Worlds. Top Esports obviously bowing out yesterday as of, the time of recording this. Weibo being the ones to take them down, being able to move on in a 5-game series. A pretty close series that Weibo was probably the better team in by a pretty considerable margin, and EDG not coming into this series with nearly as much confidence. They actually bowed out in the playoffs from Top Esports. Top Esports was able to take them to 5 and able to take them down, and so to see Weibo be able to overcome Top Esports, it's not necessarily a great sign from EDG, and they also don't have a ton of confidence from their previous series, that being LNG a couple of days ago, where they did just kind of get run off the map by a team that, quite frankly, is just much better than they are. I think a lot of people are looking at Weibo as the favorites, and I would tend to agree. I think even in the regular season, I was talking about Weibo just straight up being better than Edward Gaming. I actually got a lot of flack in terms of my week-to-week analysis, my weekly recaps here in the LPL in the comment section for having Weibo in my top 4, basically all split long. We had a lot of people talking about how they just simply weren't going to be consistent enough. Going to be interesting to see if they're going to kind of live up to maybe my expectation or maybe not live up to my expectation. Definitely going to be intriguing, but Edward Gaming is a team that I really do think has gotten better over the course of the year. They're going to rely a lot on Uzi in this particular matchup. Uzi versus Light is definitely the matchup I'm looking at the most. I really do think that that is going to kind of influence the game and the series a ton, but when you look at Edward Gaming, you can definitely see an avenue for them to be able to generate leads on the top side of the map, potentially with Ale, who's playing really well, and Jeje, who I think is a better jungler than Weiwei. So really, really intriguing matchup here for both sides. I'm slightly favoring Weibo, like I said in yesterday's video, but I certainly don't think it's like conclusive and 100%. I could see an avenue where both of these teams do end up coming out on top, but that's the preview. It's time to jump into the actual analysis of these games, and that means we get to kick it off with game number 1, and the winner of game number 1 was Weibo Gaming. They are able to take the first game in this series. They're able to go up 1-0, and they dominated this first game. It was not particularly close. This was one of the least close games we've gotten in the regional qualifiers up until this point. Weibo just kind of decimating EDG, and that's a really good sign for Weibo because, again, Born to Win trade is kind of the motto of what Weibo has done over the course of just 2023 in general, but even just this organization's history going back to last year as as well. But essentially what that translates to is on any given day, you might be facing the best or the worst team in the world. It really is kind of up in the air which version of Weibo you're going to get. It's always a good sign for this team to dominate a game number 1 in the way that they did here. That usually means mentally they're very locked in, that they're feeling confident, that they're feeling good about themselves, and that momentum and confidence is really, really, really big for Weibo, more so than almost any other team in the entire world. And so want to give them big props for being able to take this game 1 in as dominant fashion as they did. When you win like this, though, it's really hard to pinpoint one player that really stood out more so than the rest. This really was more of a team effort than it was, you know, just one individual player running the map or anything like that. I'm going to give player of the game to Weibo in the jungle on this Poppy. This champion continues to dominate basically every single time it's picked in basically every region that it's picked. It's just so versatile in how it wants to play the game. Poppy can engage, can be kind of a big aggressive force, especially in the early game in terms of gank pressure. Poppy's a lot better at that than I think people give her credit for. And also, she just shuts down so many of the major threats in the meta at the current moment. If you're playing really aggro on Poppy, Tristana and Zeri and Renekton all have a much harder time of actually being able to play the game. Not only can Renekton not dash in if you don't want him to dash in, same thing with Sejuani, but you can get on Tristana, you can get on Zeri, and all of a sudden, they can't dash out, which becomes significantly more difficult for them to actually have to play into. And I think Weibo piloted it really well. Great early game coming in from him, and he was a question mark for me for Weibo, not because I think he's a bad player, but rather because I think he's just kind of an average player, like a good player, if you will. Average is probably underselling what Weibo is. He's a good player. He's a top, 6 or 7 jungler in the LPL. I just don't think he's, like, in that super elite class that I think Jejek could potentially be a part of if he plays at a high level. But Weibo kind of proving me wrong, at least in this game number 1. He was really good in that series against Top Esports as well. Certainly the better jungler over the back half of that series when those games started to matter more, and he's kicking this off really well. Maybe he's just a big game performer, and that's exactly what you want to see. Never really got the opportunity on Billy back in the day, is now getting a little bit more of an opportunity on Weibo to show that. But I thought the Shy was awesome in this game. That's going to be a big turning point in this series. If the Shy can be better than Ale, I think EDG actually is going to really struggle in this series. A lot of their wins have come through top lane, even in the playoffs. I mean, Uzi's been a big part of the other ones. Fofo generating pressure has been a big part of that. But, if Ale can be that consistent, like, carry presence that he's kind of been over the course of this year for EDG, I think that's going to be big. But the Shy stepping up and just being super useful, winning lane on the Ornn into the Renekton is just super, super powerful. We've seen the Renekton actually fall off in terms of success rate, not in terms of pick rate, certainly, but in terms of being able to win, it's really not been all that successful in the LPL, and this was another game that does kind of prove that. Xiaohu, Light, Crisp, they were all really good. Light was doing a ridiculous amount of damage by the back half of this game. Just in general, it felt like Weibo was running things, and I think that's exactly what you wanted to see. And then for EDG, you got blasted in game number 1. If you were coming into this series with a lack of confidence already, this is only going to amplify that by 10,000. I mean, I can't imagine where the mental of this team is at after this. Basically, everybody played bad. I'm going to highlight a couple of players for playing poorly, but nobody played well in this game. Dud of the game is going to go to Fofo in the mid lane. When he loses pressure in the mid lane matchup, especially as something like a Tristana, this team really struggles to be able to kind of recoup. I think he's been a lot more important to this team than people give him credit for. I think he's had a lot of really good performances over the course of this year, but when he does play bad, which has happened, like not every single game, but more than once, right, over the course of this split, this team just doesn't really know what to do in the early to mid game without Fofo being able to move around the map, and that was never more clear than in this situation. Fofo was awful mechanically, just consistently jumping in, not realizing that he doesn't have the damage to blow people up and then dying. But I think you could say the same thing for a solo lane partner in Ale in the top lane, who again just kind of got outplayed by the Shy. They were really the two that I was kind of debating as to who was going to get my dud of the game. I ended on Fofo. It felt like he was a little bit more obvious about it, but Ale struggling is really going to be a problem for EDG. He's been someone that they can really rely on over the course of this year, and not having that opportunity in this series would be a major negative. Uzi was pretty bad, didn't really have an opportunity to do anything on the Zeri, was dealing no damage and was awful in lane. JJ gave up so much pressure early and never really was able to recover on the Sejuani, and Mako, I don't think, blocked a single Ornn ult as Braum the entire game. It just feels like EDG's mental is so completely broken at this point. Everyone played bad. Now, that's not to say that's exactly what's going to happen over the course of this entire series. They got plenty of time to be able to figure things out, recoup, and get back on track, but I think they're going to have to do it in game 2. If you go down 0-2 against a team like Weibo, giving them that much confidence and putting yourself in that level mentally, like having to win 3 games in a row, I think that is worst case scenario for EDG. And so this is a must-win game number 2. I usually don't say that, but this really is like a must-win game number 2 for EDG, in my opinion. And Weibo, I think, is sitting in a good spot. Obviously, going up 2-0 would be massive, but even if they drop a game, I think they're still going to be feeling pretty good. So definitely a momentum swing already in game number 1. But is EDG going to be able to tie the series up, or is Weibo going to take a dominating series lead here? Well, the winner of game number 2 was Edward Gaming. They are able to take game number 2. They're gonna tie this series up at 1 apiece, and boy, did they need this. Like I said in the previous entry, they would have actually been in a really tough spot had they not been able to win this game number 2. You certainly do not want to go down 0-2 to Weibo, and honestly, for most of this game, that looked like exactly what was going to happen. EDG was going to fall down 0-2, Weibo was running the game, but things don't always go according to plan when Weibo Gaming is involved. This team had like a 7k gold lead at 15, 16 minutes. And then by 23 minutes, the game was over and Edward Gaming had won. I don't know how you throw the game that fast, but it honestly was incredibly impressive on the side of Weibo. And typically speaking, there are a couple of members that I think are kind of associated with throwing some games and throwing some leads, you know, talking about the top side of the map with the Shy, but it really was not his fault in this one. We're going to get to a lot of the different reasons that Weibo ended up crumbling down, I guess you could say, but I really do believe that they, you know, played well in the early game, but credit to EDG. I think you got to be able to keep your mental on after that game number 1 shellacking to go down 7k gold in like the first 15-ish minutes of the game and to still be able to come back and win relatively cleanly in the end. Really good stuff. I mean, that's the kind of mental that you want a team like this to have. And I really do think that they relied on some of the players that did need to step up. Player of the game for me is going to go to Jeje in the jungle. They do not win this without so many clutch Rel engages. That champion can be so strong. Typically speaking, though, Rel is actually really bad from behind because what Rel does is engage and set up teammates for being able to fight. But if you're in a position where you don't want to engage or there is no real easy way to clean engage, Rel typically isn't very good. Not going to be a champion that is going to be able to do all that much, and that's oftentimes the circumstance that you find yourself in when you do have to play from behind. But Jeje, I think, still piloted it incredibly well in this one and was able to actually generate a ton of momentum for EDG in this game. Without those Rel engages in the back half, I just don't think they win. I really do think he was that crucial towards what this team ended up doing. I think Mako was actually in a similar boat. Really good stuff on the Alistar, but both of them were incredibly crucial towards this game ending as quickly as it did. Fofo was awesome on the Jace, a ridiculous amount of damage coming out towards the back half of the game. This has been his signature champion over the course of this year. I'm surprised to not see them consistently go towards it in the mid lane. I do like him on things like Tristana. I think it gives you a very similar play style, but the Jace in particular has really been the thing that I think has unlocked Edward Gaming. Basically all of 2023, even go back to spring, this was a champion that Fofo was playing more than any other LPL mid laner, and now that it's crazy meta and everybody's wanting to pick it up, I'm just surprised to not see EDG, you know, prioritize it basically higher than everything else in the game at the moment. But Fofo continues to look great on it. Uzi was really solid, especially down the stretch, was pretty consistent at being able to deal damage, but was never kind of the focal point of the game. And that's kind of similar for Ale, who was just kind of meh throughout this game. Again, I honestly think the Shy has been better across the first couple of games in this series, but Ale's been fine, I guess, this time playing the Ornn in the Ornn versus Renekton matchup. And what a surprise, again, the Renekton loses in that matchup. It's actually insane how consistent that's been in the LPL over the last few weeks. This matchup in particular going in favor of the Ornn, but really, really good stuff from EDG to keep your mental on, to find avenues to be able to get yourself back in the game and to pull the trigger on those avenues. A lot of teams would be too scared to try and make some of the plays that EDG made towards the back half, but I don't think they were. They were not scared. They played like they could still win the game, and then they walked out of it with a win, which is really good. And then for Weibo on the other side, like I said, having a 7k gold lead and completely throwing it, there is nothing more Weibo than that. That's just kind of how this team operates, but it's definitely a little bit frustrating, not only because it happened, but because of how it happened. A couple of players that I think were playing really well up until that point in this series, just not playing all that well towards the back half. My dud of the game is going to go to Weiwei in the jungle. It felt like he was the most expendable piece of Weibo over the course of this game. The Sejuani was just not nearly as effective as either the Rel or the Alistar on the other side of the map at being able to set plays up for the rest of the team. You want to take that Sejuani and combo it with the Leona so that the Leona can, you know, full initiate, full start engage, and then the Sejuani can follow up, either be major peel if you want that with the Renekton on the flank, or be that secondary engage threat. But Wei was kind of neither in this game, and I think that that was definitely a major negative for Weibo overall, but Light was also really bad, just consistently giving over a bunch of gold over to EDG in the back half of the game. As Kai'Sa, you have to be able to time your engages properly, because that champion can really just get blown up. Obviously, you're an AD carry, but you do want to play aggressive because you want to be able to maximize her damage, so you have to find the right middle ground, and I don't think Light found that in the back half of this game. I think the Shy was really good. I think Crisp was easily the best player on Weibo in this game, and honestly, I feel really bad for Crisp. He played really well. He was really good in game 1 as well, and he continues to pretty clearly be the best player on Weibo Gaming, and I think that was the case again in game 2. But just the piece as a whole, the game as a whole was not good enough, quite frankly, from Weibo to be able to take the win, and so the series is now tied up at 1 apiece. Weibo still, I think, has a lot of momentum, but EDG showing that they're not going to go down without a fight. If they're able to take game 3, all of a sudden this series is 2-1, and all that momentum that we all said that Weibo definitely had going into the series has been completely flipped. So very big game 3 from both of these teams, but who is going to be able to take it? Well, the winner of game number 3 was Weibo Gaming. They are able to take game number 3. They're going to go up in this series 2-1, and they have regained full control of everything going on now between these two teams, and this is another big win for them. Game 2 was just a throw to give EDG false confidence. That is the narrative that I think you've got to start spinning at this point, because Weibo legit played super well in this game. They did everything that they were supposed to, and they were able to execute on some really, really good engages. In general, I think EDG's draft is just way too risky for this part of the game. You are hedging your entire game on early game, and if you're not able to win lane, if you're not able to generate leads individually, like, you're just not going to be able to do anything in this game, and unfortunately, that was the case. Look at EDG's comp, and then look at Weibo's comp. You're looking at a Rel, you're looking at an Azir, you're looking at an Aphelios, an Ornn, hell, even a Milio, who's going to do so much for making this game so much easier into Rakan, you know, into Sejuani. But, like, for EDG, like, what do you do at 20 minutes if you have to play from relatively even? Jace is not going to deal enough damage, and Lucian is certainly not going to deal enough damage. So, like, I don't really know what the entire point of this draft was. I really don't like this idea coming in from them. And Weibo definitely punished it. Once they were able to kind of relatively stay even and actually gain a little bit of a lead in the early game, it was over. Like, there was nothing EDG was going to be able to do. So, props to Weibo for knowing their win condition and being able to execute on it. But player of the game for me, again, pretty obviously, is going to go to Weiwei in the jungle. He was player of the game and then dud of the game, and now is player of the game again. So a pretty eventful series coming in from Weiwei so far, but he's been really, really good when he's had the opportunity to be a full initiator, to be a primary engage threat from the side of Weibo. I really do think this is a role that benefits Weiwei a ton as a player. He's kind of been known as a carry in the past, as somebody who's wanted to play more, you know, teamfight-oriented champions, but I think he still wants to play towards that part of the game. He's still not the best early-game jungler in the entire world, although he has been pretty good in this series, certainly better than he has been in the regular season. He's been the better jungler of these two early game, but really what I know Weiwei for is really, really good team fighting, and I think that is definitely still continued here. He's just doing it now on more engaged, tank-oriented threats. Things like the Rel that are going to still be active in the early game, and I like that for Weiwei. I think this fits right into kind of his wheelhouse in terms of what he needs to do for the team, as well as the things that he individually is very good and practiced at. And I think the Rel pick has just been massive for both teams across this series so far. This is a champion that we have seen not work over the course of this year, like at times, but when it does work, like when you do get a player that is able to maximize what Rel is able to do, it looks so effortless, like it looks so broken when a really good team or a really good player ends up using Rel, and I think that's what Weiwei was in this series, or in this game, was effortless. Like, he was just everywhere on the map. He was creating opportunities for every single lane, and it was basically over by 10-15 minutes into the game. Of course, the rest of the team did step up. Light and Xiaohu were doing a good amount of damage, but man, Crisp continues to be massive for this team. I'm a huge, huge proponent of Milio in the bot lane. I still think that Milio is ridiculously strong, much stronger than people are giving him credit for, and I think he's arguably one of the best supports in the entire game, and we're seeing a lot of that value here. We're seeing even more indexing into things like, you know, heavy crowd control comps, things like Sejuani, things like Rakan, Nautilus, Alistar, things like that are very, very common. You have a get-out-of-jail-free card card with Milio. Like, yeah, I want that. Like, yeah, I want that potentially going into Rel. Or yeah, I want that potentially going into Rakan. Like, it just makes the game so much easier for your carries to play. I don't understand why Milio has fallen off in popularity so much, because I still truly do believe that he is one of the elite supports in the game, and I've made a very, very big case for that over the course of this year, and we see another really good performance here from Crisp on it. But like I said, Xiaohu and Light were good. The Shy was fine on the Ornn, was kind of bad in some of these team fights. Ornn ulted backwards, and yet it still ended up hitting people. What a weird champion that is in general, but again, Ornn beating Renekton, another example of that happening. It's happened all year long. It's crazy, that matchup, and just even when Ornn doesn't dominate the laning phase, just how good Ornn is in terms of the late game scaling that Renekton just can't match. Pretty wild, but really nice win for Weibo, and they're now on series point, which is the same thing you can say for Edward Gaming. They are one game officially away from having their 2023 season ended, and I certainly don't think that's where they want to be. It's a very do-or-die situation. But again, I really hate this draft for EDG. You're indexing so hard into that early game. You R5 Lucian, who I just don't think is all that strong right now. I do think that the AD carry role is very expansive in terms of the picks that you can and can't go for. And Lucian definitely kind of falls into that category. I think he's playable in certain matchups, but I just don't know if this was the matchup for Lucian, if this was the team comp for R5 Lucian. And man, he was so useless this game. Uzi is going to get my dud of the game here in game number 3. Uzi was such an integral part towards what this team wanted to do, especially in the regular season, but I'm going to be entirely honest. In the playoffs, and basically ever since, you know, the playoffs and the best of 5 stage has started, Uzi and Mako have been the worst part of this team. I don't even think it's really all that up for debate. Mako's obviously had his problems the whole split, but Uzi, I think, has taken some major steps back in terms of his ability to do well in laning phase as well. You're playing Lucian Rakan into Aphelios Milio. You need to be able to dominate the mid game here. You need to be able to establish pressure before that Aphelios just out pressures you, and he just wasn't able to do that really at any point in this game. The Lucian was completely useless. Some people are going to chalk that up to the champion, but I do think that the champion could do something in a situation like this. I just think the moment that Uzi started getting outplayed, the champion had no backup plan and therefore couldn't actually survive. Ale continues to be the worst of these two top laners, which is very surprising to me. Jeje's having a rough series. Fofo couldn't really do anything in this game, and I think Mako was actually relatively fine, but, you know, Uzi, I think, was actually the big problem in the laning phase, in my opinion, especially watching the game, but I do think that EDG needs to step up. Now, you need a more expansive comp. You need something that can give you a little bit more flexibility, because that's exactly what you took away from yourself in this game. I think with a better comp, you have a chance, but Weibo is rolling right now, and they are one official game away from going to the World Championships, and that would be so awesome for a lot of these players who have been trying so hard to get back to that tournament for quite a long time. But are they going to be able to do it here, or is EDG going to be able to bring us to a game number 5? Well, the winner of game number 4 was Weibo Gaming. They are able to take game 4, and they are officially not only going to take this series, but punch their ticket to the 2023 World Championships. Congratulations to Weibo. They absolutely deserve this. I know that that's a very weird thing to say, because obviously, if you're able to make Worlds out of the LPL, you absolutely deserve it, but this organization and a lot of these players have been so close for so long. A couple of these players really, you know, kind of struggling to get back to a place that they've been before. The Shy, obviously the one that's gaining a lot of attention, but Light returning to Worlds is a really big story here. Crisp returning to Worlds is a massive story here, a former world champion, and now he's going back on this Weibo team. Xiaohu, someone who just left RNG and is still managing to find success and continuously break the mold of what he has consistently been labeled in as, oh, a spring player or just a good mid laner. He consistently overperforms that. Weiwei, who didn't have a team at the start of the year, was a massive reason why this team is going to Worlds. Just in general, everything working for Weibo, and you've got to be so excited for this team. For EDG, obviously, this has to feel pretty bad. I think after Spring Split, it felt like a lock that this team was going to be one of the 4 teams representing the LPL at the World Championships, but things have just taken a turn for the worse. Leaving, I think, was honestly, you know, you could consider it a positive, because Uzi came in the regular season and was better than what Leave was offering, but just all the drama around that situation, and this team never really clicking in a way that meant that they were all that dangerous, ends up leading them into a 5th place finish, essentially, and the closest team to not not make the World Championships from the LPL. But let's talk about this game number 4 before we talk about all of the ramifications and everything. This was a really good game from Weibo. They played it again incredibly solidly. This one was a lot closer. There were some things that were definitely going EDG's way, mostly in the early game, where they really were able to generate quite a few leads, but a lot of picks from Weibo were really, really strong in the late game, and the teamfight stage was just where Weibo ended up excelling, and that's where a lot of these players excel. When you look at the construction of the Weibo gaming roster, you're looking at Xiaohu, you're looking at Light. These are all really, really big teamfight threat players, and even a player like the Shy, I think, can be really good in the teamfight stage while he's a little bit more inconsistent in lane. And so EDG, while they were able to generate a lot of early leads, specifically on that Varus, getting him quite a bit of gold, they just did literally nothing with it over the back half of the game, outside of the LeBlanc, which we'll get to, but Weibo was just able to dominate. The Kai'Sa got super online, and from that point onwards, it was impossible for them to win. Player of the game here in Game 4 is going to go to Light in the bot lane. I'm going to be honest, Light's actually been a little bit more inconsistent than I would have expected him to be over the back half of this split. I really do think that players like Weiwei and Crisp have been really good in this playoff run, have been giant positives for Weibo Gaming, and Light hasn't exactly stepped up in the way that I might have expected him to. He's always been this major stable presence. I think he's been having a few more under-the-radar games, if you will, than, he usually does. Usually I'm always like, wow, he's really, really good, and obviously he's one of the best players, but it's been a little bit more questionable for me in this run. Not in game number 4 here. He was phenomenal on the Kai'Sa. He really wasn't able to generate a ton of early gold, which was actually a little bit surprising for me, not because, this matchup is particularly easy, but because I do think that they are the better bot lane. But it didn't really matter that he didn't win the early game. He's still playing the strongest AD carry in the game at the moment, and as soon as he started generating some gold in the mid game, it was off to the races for Weibo. They knew they could play around this Kai'Sa, and they operated and played around it in an incredibly efficient way. I'm really impressed with what they were able to do. Crisp in general was phenomenal this series, but for me, player of the series, maybe surprisingly, is going to go to Weiwei in the jungle. I really do think he was the most valuable player to what Weibo was doing in this series. I think if they didn't have a jungler that was consistently winning in the early game through the first part of this series, it would have been a little bit more difficult. Weiwei wasn't very good here in game number 4, and I think obviously he had his problems in the back half of game 2, but their wins in games 1 and 3, I think, were almost entirely dictated on his ability to engage and set up things as the jungler. So really good stuff coming in from Weiwei. I think if you wanted to give player of the series to Crisp in the support position, I certainly wouldn't push back on that. He was probably the most consistent member of this team across every single game. Even in their one loss, he was easily the best player on their team in that game, and he probably should have won that game, just based off of his performance, but he's just the best player on Weibo. It's not even a question anymore. I've been saying it all year long, and it's only been solidified as we've gone further and further and further. Crisp has been awesome. And then the player that everybody's talking about, the Shy. I understand, I tweeted this out. I get why the narrative is entirely around the Shy, because he's Kadrill's favorite player, and, Kadrill's one of the biggest league streamers in the world, and so when you have a player that, kind of gets that kind of coverage from an outlet as big as Kadrill, obviously his notoriety is going to skyrocket. But it is kind of funny that the entire narrative of Weibo going to Worlds is dominated by the Shy is finally going back to Worlds. Yeah, that's a really big story, but so is Crisp, who's been gone from Worlds just as long, and so is Light, who is, really, really struggled on really bad teams over the past couple of years, and Weiwei, who was benched, and Xiaohu, who proved he could do it outside of RNG. I think that, honestly, yes, the Shy story is great, but everybody's got an awesome story here on Weibo. It's not one player that I think is really standing out as having this super intriguing story that I can't believe this player is finally back at Worlds. Quite frankly, it's all 5 of them, and that's what makes this so much more exciting for me, is I think you can really look at Weibo as an org and the 5 players on Weibo as players that have really overcome their demons by getting into the main stage here at Worlds. But for EDG, unfortunate way to end your season. I do think that there were some positives. I think Ale actually probably had his best game of the series here in Game 4 on the Fiora. Was relatively fine in the side lane and really didn't make any major errors. And then Fofo I thought was pretty good on the LeBlanc. He was actually able to generate quite a bit of an early lead going into the Jace, which is usually not how that goes. And he was by far the most consistent member of this team over the course of this game. But the problem, honestly, just continued to stand out. This bot lane wasn't very good in the teamfight stage. And, that was something that we noted a lot in the regular season for Edward Gaming. It was a big reason why they were so low in my power rankings basically all year, why they barely struggled to get into playoffs as the number 7 seed, but at the end of the day, they needed to fix that in order to be a team that could compete with a team like Weibo, and they just couldn't. Uzi and Mako were never on the same page. Uzi's gonna get my dud of the game here in Game 4. He was given so much gold at the beginning of the game from Jeje, from Fofo roams, from Mako setups, and he did nothing with it over the back half. I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are like, oh, you know, you should give this to Mako, or you should give this to Jeje. To me, watching Uzi do so little damage over the back half of this game was a big reason why this team ended up not being able to really do all that much. I don't think Uzi played particularly well. I don't think Mako played particularly well in this series. This bot lane, quite frankly, just did not work. They were the weak link for EDG, and I think that was very apparent. Jeje was also just kind of fine on the Sedge. He actually had a much better early game than he had in their earlier losses, but it just didn't really matter. There wasn't enough pressure on the map to actually be able to win any fights in the late game. But for EDG, that's the end of year 2023. It's an unfortunate way to end the year, but I can't say that I didn't see this coming, right? EDG never really felt like a Worlds team in summer, and, you know, even though they were, you know, 2 games away ostensibly, like, I just don't think that it really ever was all that close for them. They end up not being able to beat LNG in that upper bracket. They end up falling to Weibo, not being able to win a series here in the regional finals, and they're probably going to look back on this year as a year of turmoil, quite frankly. I think that you could look at some of the positives. I think that Ale looked really good on this team. I think Fofo was honestly relatively positive for them. I think there are things to take away from this, but it's going to be interesting what direction to see they go in next year, because I really don't know what they're going to do. If they're going to completely blow it up, if they're going to build around Uzi, if Uzi is going to go back into retirement, if they want to move on from players like Mako and Jeje that weren't exactly all that good down the stretch. It's really going to be intriguing to see which avenue EDG ends up going in, but for now, that's the conversation surrounding this team because their season is over. But again, congratulations to Weibo. They're the 4th and final team going to Worlds, and they absolutely earned it in this series. All right, but that is going to do it for my LPL Regional Qualifier Final Overview and Analysis video. Up on the screen, you're going to see the bracket, how it worked out, obviously. LNG winning yesterday to confirm their spot as the 3 seed, Weibo Gaming winning today to confirm their spot as the 4 seed, Edward Gaming and Top Esports not being able to get the job done here in the Regional Qualifier. But that now means that we know our 4 teams going to Worlds. The number 1 seed, JD Gaming, with them winning, you know, everything up until this point, the spring split, MSI, and the summer split. Billy qualifying for 2nd seed because they had the most amount of championship points outside of that. LNG as that 3rd seed, making finals, getting that win in the upper bracket. And then Weibo Gaming today, grabbing that 4th seed. Incredibly excited for all 4 of these teams, obviously. We're going to be going all 4 of them in the context of the World Championships. When we get to Worlds coverage in just a couple, well, I guess it's quite a while now. Quite frankly, there's a big break for LPL players that aren't going to the Asian games, but, you know, we're going to get to that when Worlds coverage starts, but that's going to mark the end of my LPL coverage for 2023. I really do hope you guys enjoyed. We've been putting out content on every single week, all year long, spring, summer, everything. And so if you guys enjoyed it, please leave a like. It really does mean a lot to me. We've done so much work on the LPL, and obviously the work's not done. We've still got all the other major regions as well to go over, but you know, the LPL wrapping up, I think, is definitely the big one. And so really just want to say thank you to those of you who have stuck around and watched all the content. It really does mean a lot to me. We put a lot of time and effort into this. And so if you've stuck around all year long, I really do appreciate it. But again, it's not over. I can't wait to get into Worlds. And these are the 4 teams that I think I'm most excited to see at that tournament. I think that these are the perfect 4 representatives from the LPL and the ones that we probably deserve. And so let me know if you agree down in the comment section below. Do you agree that these are the 4 teams that you want to see at the World Championships, or would you have rather seen Edward Gaming or Top Esports or Oh My God, or basically any of the other interesting teams that we could talk about in this slot? I'd love to know you guys' thoughts and opinions. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. It really does mean a lot to me. Lets me know you guys are enjoying the content, and it helps get this video out to a lot more people, which of course I'm always very appreciative of. Of course, hit subscribe. We don't only cover the LPL on this channel. We cover all 4 of the major regions as well as the NACL, and so, you know, with LPL done, that doesn't mean that coverage isn't, you know, basically kicking off everywhere else as well. You know, all of those regions are still going to be putting out champions for Worlds, and I'm really excited to see who's going to end up facing off against these 4 LPL seeds. So hit subscribe, hit that bell so you can be notified when those videos go live. But of course, with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.